We are in Slovakia, formerly Upper Hungary, just in Jablonica. And the chateau behind me is the place where Count Rudolf Apponyi, the man this video is going to be about, lived and where he returned from his diplomatic services in Italy and in Paris. As you already know, the House of Apponyi was the Hungarian house of highly educated literates, bibliophiles and diplomats. However, Count Rudolf Apponyi stands out from his noble peers. Not only his diplomatic service was recorded in the form of diaries, but also his diaries were published and used as a reference to the period of the so-called July monarchy in France, or else the times of the King Louis-Philippe. This published journal, subtitled Vingt-cinq à Paris, in which Count Rudolf lively described the salons, balls and theatre performances of his time, is interesting reading. But let's start from the beginning and introduce first the person of its author. Count Rudolf Apponyi de Nagyapony was born in Oponice Chateau as a son of Joseph Senior and his wife Eleonore Jechlinger von Jochen in 1802. He was the second of 4 sons. His mother died prematurely and his father got married for the second time. His new wife was recommended to him by the divine Thérèse Apponyi née Nogarola. Her name was Thérèse Serbeioni. Rudolf soon proved his qualities as a clever young man, and his uncle from the Oponice line, Count Anton Apponyi, helped him with his debut as an attaché at the Austrian embassy in Rome in 1824. After return to Hungary, Prince Metternich first wanted him to continue in his diplomatic services, that time in London, but then he changed his destination, and from 1825 to 1852 Rudolf was a diplomat in Paris by his uncle Anton's side. He arrived at Paris on the 5th of February 1826, and in the end of the same month he started writing his journal. Its pages hide so many events they can hardly be squeezed into a short video of this kind, so let's remember at least some of them. In 1830 he spent his holiday in Normandy's spa town Dieppe, while in Paris the July Revolution overthrew Charles X. The whole July Revolution lasted only 3 days between Tuesday the 27th and Thursday the 29th July, which is why it's called Three Glorias, but it was no less bloody. Despite the revolution, Count Rudolf, as the majority of conservative aristocracy, remained a legitimist, that is, a believer in the legitimate rule of Charles X's descendants. In his journal he didn't hide his view. This is how he described his return to Paris on the 1st of September 1830. Here I am back in Paris, and I didn't think I would see this city, which was once so attractive to me, ever again. When I entered it this time, it felt differently. This capital, so brilliant a few weeks ago, so happy, so flourishing, and under the government that inspired confidence, is now an abyss. A lair of immorality, revolt, division and discord. How can I ever find words strong enough to express what I felt when I arrived at the square of Louis XVI and his half-finished memorial? The pedestal destined to receive the statue of the martyrite king is desecrated by the flag of revolt and condemned to be a monument to the charter. Of course, Paris of the 1830s was a different city than a tourist sees today. La Vieille Dame, the Eiffel Tower, didn't stand there yet, and the city reminded a visitor of its medieval history. That was one of the reasons why in 1832 the city had to survive the arrival of a deadly epidemic of cholera in Paris. Count Rudolf made notes on it since the very beginning. This one is from the 17th of April 1832. There have been some 15,000 deaths since the start of the epidemic. On the day when the Moniteur announced that 1,009 people were ill, there had been 1,064 deaths, and since then the number has risen to 8,907. The government estimates that when the disease disappears, there will be nearly 30,000 deaths, so we are still only halfway through. We were firmly convinced that cholera would be nothing in Paris. Our doctors were sure they would treat it like a cold, but one of them told us the other day that on his own account he had had 800 fatal cases and that these patients had passed away under his care. The then existing theory of infectious diseases was built on the existence of miasma, a foul, stinking substance which was supposed to cause all diseases. Therefore, it's hardly surprising that the cure of cholera consists of fresh air and menthol. The more religious people still believed in the help of saints. Nevertheless, the epidemic scared Paris and caused a massive improvement in the sewerage system and the housing standard. But Count Rudolf didn't stay only in Paris. From time to time he returned to Vienna, had dinners with Prince Metternich and visited his parents in Jablonica, as same as his friends in Pressburg. He also met many famous artists including Chateaubriand, Balzac, Walter Scott or Alexandre Dumas. This is what he wrote about Chateau Monte Cristo and its famous owner, the notoriously unreliable and indebted author of Three Musketeers, or Joseph Balsamo. Alexandre Dumas' little chateau in Saint-Germain cost over 300,000 francs, of which he had paid nothing. The creditors seized everything and Dumas was forced to leave his beautiful real estate, which was only a maintenance burden and a huge expense for the owner. They cashed it again for 30,000 francs and handed the property over to the new buyer. But how surprised they were to learn that it was Dumas, his son and his wife-in-law who actually became owners the same day. As nothing had been disturbed, Dumas found everything where he left it and got, for 30,000 francs, what would have cost him 300,000. Count Rudolf left Paris in 1849 when Count Anton's function as an ambassador finished. He returned, though, without any function in 1851 and stayed till the next year when his journal finishes. Throughout his life he stayed unmarried. He met a lot of famous women, but probably none of them attracted him enough to commit for life. After his return to Vienna, he was able to survive without his Parisian salon life only for a year. On the 30th December 1853, after a short disease which didn't seem serious at its beginning, he died. We finished just where we started, in Jablonica, where Count Rudolf lived and where he is buried now in the church, just opposite the chateau where he used to live with his family all his life, when he wasn't in the diplomatic services in Italy or in Paris. Even though Rudolf's journal was published in Paris between 1913 and 1914 by Ernest Daudet, Rudolf himself remains half forgotten, and only his gravestone in the church is a witness of this worldly man, a welcomed guest of Parisian society. But the fame has nothing to do with the aristocratic honor, and that is something which Count Rudolf can be deprived of by no one anymore. He remains a remarkable member of the House of Apponyi. The next time, we'll have a look at another, maybe even more famous one.